Okay, so let's face it, folks. When we think love bomb, we think fairy tale, flowers, beach vacation, dinners out, spending incessant amounts of time with someone, sexy, flirty texts, great spontaneous sex, and the wacky words of affirmation. Things like, your love changed me. Nobody will ever love you the way I love you. You are my soulmate. We were destined to be together. This is the greatest love story. People who are in a good place and feel secure may actually believe that all this romance is how it's supposed to be. And you may just think, well, it's about time. This is my love story, and yay. People who came from invalidating and narcissistic families may be drinking up all of this validation and attention after a lifetime of not being seen. All of us are vulnerable to love bombing. I don't buy anyone saying, well, I'll be able to see that from a mile away. Love bombing kind of feels like being in a relationship with sexy AI. They shape their love bombing to what works for us. For example, we may be someone who's a little uncomfortable with lavish gifts, so they start shaping themselves and show up with something simpler or handmade. They learn we're vegetarian, and all of a sudden the reservation shows up to the hip, hot new vegan restaurant. They learn that our parents were never there for us, and they listen to us intently. The love bombing gets shaped over time, which is what makes it so nefarious. In the love bombing phase, done right, we really do feel seen and cherished and valued because we get the thing that we craved, whatever it is that's special to us. The fairy tale isn't the grandiose princess story of it all. The fairy tale is that the story is exactly what we hoped for. And you can spend a lifetime wishing that you get to go back to those love bomb days. Sorry, folks, love bombing is a limited release with a short run. But there is a form of love bombing that can do an even worse number on us. And that is dark love bombing. Listen, traditional love bombing, if it happens to us, we can cop to it and say, I see what happened. They told me I was the best ever. I fell in love with the romance. Not really. It's not really them. I wanted the fairy tale, but then I saw it. It makes sense. Who wouldn't be pulled in by it? We walk towards shiny things. It's human nature. People almost in some ways can say, okay, it was nuts. It was a fairy tale. Dark love bombing, on the other hand, involves the love bomber playing on parts of ourselves that we don't like, or our more difficult experiences, or maybe our more painful views of the world, our sense of being wronged, our fears, our grievances, our frustrations, our sense that life is unfair or unjust. They may be things that we aren't proud of ourselves. Perhaps we're working on them in therapy. They may relate to long-standing histories of being angry at narcissistic or traumatizing family members. They may relate to views on society being unfair to you. They may relate to injustices that you experience in the world or at a job, real things. Dark love bombing plays on our own existing resentments and fears, angers, grievances, disillusionment, because these may be things that we don't always share. But maybe we let them slip. Maybe we talk about missing out on an advancement opportunity at work, and as part of the dark love bomb, we hear, I know, it's so unfair. You are so much smarter, it sounds like, than the people you work with, but that stupid company of yours just advances the people who are cozy with the boss. F them, you deserve better. Folks, there is no bouquet of flowers or fancy dinner that feels better than having our frustration heard and expressed and validated, and not having someone try to cheer us up or maybe even say that we are being too negative about the situation. We may not say out loud that feeling that we were unfairly passed over and that only the boss's friends and family get advanced, but that someone else can see that injustice and express it. It can feel like the light of 100 suns shining on us, because then we feel really heard and we feel really validated and frankly vindicated. dark love bombing finds those difficult things and shines a bright light on them for us. Most people don't walk around and say, I am a victim. Some might, and certainly narcissistic folks do all the time. I mean, there are times when some people may identify as a victim, especially if it's more tangible. For example, as a victim of a crime. But when it comes to more long-term relational things or perceptions of bias, that doesn't tend to happen. And a person may instead view themselves as someone who has been through something. But over time, the person who may view themselves as having gone through something, and that becomes their identity, and there is no attempt to seek out help or heal or dig into something deeper within themselves, can really get stuck in a thought loop. All of us who have been through narcissistic relationships understand this, because all of us have had or still do have the sense of being wronged, and that it was and is all unfair. And it's true it is unfair, and it was a bad twist of fate. All of that's true. So when someone comes along and says, you are suffering more than anyone, or more than most people in your situation, and I see that, and they let you be angry, and may even fan the flames of your anger, and then it starts to spin into, yeah, this sucks, and let me tell you, I got all the answers for you. That's when it starts to get risky. Having our difficulties seen and validated, great, sure. Being validated despite the tough aspects of our life, wonderful. Telling us that we are well within our rights to be mad and hurt, good. But that person then amping us up, not pushing us toward growth, but keeping us stuck in that anger, being angry themselves, and suggesting that they have all the answers. So when you do start drifting into radical acceptance or start making changes that may leave you feeling actually less aggrieved and more in control, starting to make the uncomfortable decisions and shifts, like having realistic expectations around an unfair situation or figuring out the workarounds, the dark love bomber would actually prefer to keep you in your upset, angry state. Your growth will be squelched by the dark love bomber. You staying angry forever is what works in relationships that start with dark love bombing. The least healthy relationships are the ones in which you do not grow. In the usual classical grandiose love bomb situation, the narcissistic person puts you on a pedestal. You grow to enjoy the view up there for a minute. And just as you start to feel a little bit comfortable up there, they knock you off and they catch you just as you're about to hit the ground. But then they move you to a lower shelf on that pedestal. They become your rescuer, but they will never become your encourager or the person who sees your better nature again. Maybe for a minute during a Hoover, you might see the top of that pedestal again for a second, but it's not likely. And in the classical love bomb, they do not want to see or listen to your grievances or problems or your anger either. They are more likely in a typical love bombing situation to, over time, to tell you to stop complaining, that they have it worse, that you're a whiner and ungrateful. So you doubt yourself, and you know the rest of that story. And because the dark love bombers are able to hear, actually even kind of like your disappointments and anger, the dark love bombing can actually be very powerful, especially if you feel that some of your misfortunes have never been heard. In the dark love bomb, you're actually never really put on that pedestal. Instead, the dark love bomber shines a sort of light into a cave. Your grievances and frustrations and unfairnesses and harms are heard. They are validated. But the dark love bomber wants you to stay there in that dark cave, stay angry. And they are angry with you about their grievances, and you get to be angry together. But if you stop being angry, let's say you start focusing on growth as time goes on and go to therapy and work on healing. The dark love bomber, well, they're not having that. You work as a mirror for their resentment, their victimhood, their anger at the world. And you realize that the love language of the dark, love-bombed narcissistic relationship is bitterness and anger. And if you are from an abusive, invalidating family, or a family that takes advantage of you, or you work in a place which is patently unfair, for a while, a person who doesn't bright side you and who is able to tell you, wow, that this really sucks and it's unfair and you deserve better. Just like those flowers and dinners and romance and sex, it feels good. It feels like being seen. But then you realize that to be in this relationship means living in anger with a chronically stoked sense of injustice all the time, and that becomes exhausting. And you also realize that unless you stay angry, the relationship doesn't work. And even worse, you may get pulled into a paranoid, suspicious place that as you try to heal and push ahead, even if the family is still toxic or you leave the job, the dark love bomber will say, oh, they are pulling you back in. You are being played again. No wonder all these bad things happen to you. You can't see how badly you're being treated. This is an isolation play. The angry, dark love bomber pulls you away from growth and plays on that suspicious sense we have about the things that are happening in our lives and the fear we have of getting pulled back into a narcissistic relationship or a toxic system. So we may relent and stay angry to stay near this person who gets our angry, upsetting situations when we once needed it and kind of still do. If you have had enablers telling you how you are exaggerating your family situation or being dramatic or that you're too sensitive or that you need to give a family member or a boss or a friend another chance, you can see how powerful the dark love bomber can be. The frustration of your pain and of not being seen can mean the dark love bomber, who will ultimately isolate you, can feel like you're getting the honesty that you've craved, just like the classic love bomber can be the validation and love you have craved. But just like the classic grandiose narcissistic relationship only works if you be supply and give in to them and give up on yourself, the dark love-bombed relationship only works if you stay angry and magnify their anger and grouse about how awful the world is. And if you do try to make a friend or do actually know some good people or start to find solutions or simply find shifts in perspective in a healthier direction for yourself, that's where the relationship starts to shift away. And the dark love bomber will tell you that you're stupid, and again, that you're setting yourself up to be played, or that you don't get it, and that everyone is bad, and that they are the only ones who really see it and get it, and that they have your back, and that they're worried about you. Dark love bombers tend to be a sort of mashup of vulnerable and malignant narcissism. The aggrieved, angry, bitter, disenfranchised, dispossessed, sullen, vulnerable narcissism, and the isolation and the coercion of the malignant narcissism. They may not be shiny or attractive or charismatic or charming, but if you are coming off of a bunch of gaslighting enablers, or have been in narcissistic systems that were harming you, or just have experienced unfairnesses in life that others around you don't acknowledge, the angry, dark, love-bombed mirror may be the first time that someone was communicating to you how unhealthy or toxic or unfair your situation is. And that may have felt like a breath of fresh air and of honesty and a validation of your experience. And so you couldn't see the trap of slowly getting stuck in a pool of anger and bitterness and their never-ending grievances. People in dark love-bombed relationships, you often find yourselves saying angrier and angrier things that don't even feel true to you anymore. But that to stay in the relationship, being angry at the world, complaining all the time, having a million grievances, these are the only way for your relationship to work. And you become so isolated that it can feel like you are an angry cult of two. And in fact, this dark love bomb structure is often the structure of many cultic systems. The cult leaders and their recruiters play on grievances and the idea of the unfairnesses of the world, or that your life is uniquely unjust. And you may feel seen. And then once you are locked into the system, they will isolate you and reinforce your anger, and then claim to be the only space that has the answers. The classic love bomber puts you on a pedestal, knocks you down, and catches you. The dark love bomber breaks the pedestal and tells you that the two of you need to tunnel underground to get away from a world that doesn't appreciate you. The view sucks either way, but be wary of the dark love bomb. Anyone who suggests that growth is not possible and keeps repeating that everyone is bad, and they themselves is also chronically a victim, and you start seeing the signs of reactivity and anger and that thin-skinned stuff, and becoming enraged or sullen or passive-aggressive, or they give you the silent treatment when you say something, and that if you try to move forward and heal, that you're betraying them, and that you're just a shill and a fool, pay close attention. Because the longer you stay in a system like this, the harder it is to get out. The dark love bombing means more isolation, more confusion, and we don't talk about this pattern enough, which means that people may even miss that it's happening to them when it's happening to them. Love bombing often gets filed under the big, shiny fairy tale gestures of it all. But really what love bombing is a period of feeling like you've never felt like this before, that you feel uniquely seen and appreciated. And sometimes that appreciation doesn't come as gifts, but as a person acknowledging that your experience, but a person acknowledging that your experience in the world is so difficult. And if you've never gotten that kind of validation, like I said, there is no bunch of roses that can ever make you feel that way. And that brings down your defenses. And even as some of these other toxic patterns start to accumulate, it's easy to miss them. Thanks again.